morning, everyone, and welcome. It is Full Press NFL Sunday, and that's right, it is Super Bowl Sunday, Super Bowl 58 between the Chiefs and the 49ers. Yep, that's right. The 49ers, it's a rematch of Super Bowl 54 just a few years ago. I'm so glad I got those numbers right. I was very nervous I was gonna kind of screw it up. I'm kind of stuck. Super Bowl 55, Super Bowl 53, Super Bowl 52, well, not 52 so much, 51, 49. Those are just solid numbers to me. I don't know why. I just happen to always think of those ones when I think about the Super Bowl. But here we are yet again. Like I said, rematch. The Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl looking to repeat. They had an opportunity before, and just like a few teams in the past 20 years, unfortunately for them, one guy stood in their way. This time, though, he is not there. Tom Brady. So I managed to mention Tom Brady before Patrick Mahomes. So my goal is accomplished. Good morning, folks. Good morning, gentlemen. How we doing?
Yeah, I kind of like to forget that Super Bowl 55. COVID year. Not a lot of fans in the stands. I like to think that one doesn't exist, but sadly, it's probably one of the worst losses in the Mahomes era overall for the Chiefs. So looking to go back to back, like you said, a second chance at it. A lot of players vocal about what it would mean to them, and it's going to be a really interesting matchup. Like you said, a rematch of something 40 years ago. A lot of people, um, you know, saying this is the matchup that no one really wanted to see. It's going to be interesting to see, how this game kind of starts out with the 49ers starting to slow their last two playoff games. Chiefs have kind of started hot, so it's kind of a weirder feeling going into this one. I feel like the weight's been a little bit more. I don't know. It just feels like torture, kind of the last few days trying to get finally to the finish line and get this game day going.
Yeah, there's a lot. Hold on. I was just gonna say there's a lot of filler nowadays. I mean, just constant 24/7 news cycle. It's just it's exhausting. It's exhausting the build up to this game.
You mentioned exhausted. I'm old man Kyle. I've got gray in my beard, and all I care about are Super Bowl 1 and 2, and whatever year Brett Favre won, and then also 45.
Super Bowl
That's what
31.
stuck on.
I like to forget that one. That
Oh,
Super
yeah.
Bowl.
Okay, we can honestly, who cares about Favre? We can forget that one. 45. That's the one that matters.
Yeah, there you go. 45.
It could have been 49 too. Thanks, Brandon Bostic. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that happened. Thank you, Brandon. Brandon botched it, as I referred to.
Well, thanks not taking advantage of 5 turnovers is what I'd say. But again, we joked before we got on the air that we were going to make this about Rodgers versus Brady, and I actually kind of feel like we're heading down that path. So
already, mission accomplished. There you go. I haven't even mentioned either team yet in the Super Bowl. Go Pack, go!
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and Canada hat. Nick Taylor is leading the Phoenix Open currently, so go Canada.
Oh, there you go. Well, hey, real quick before we get into our football talk, since you're a Canadian guy, we all love hockey here. Thoughts on the Morgan Riley shot last night? What are we thinking? We thinking that's hey, let boys or be boys, or is that a cheap shot? What are we thinking here?
I mean, he cross-checked a guy to the face after a dude scored a goal. I don't see how it's not a cheap shot. I mean, honestly, Toronto should only be mad at themselves. Ottawa's not a very good team. You should never let them score an empty net goal because that means they're beating you. So
yes.
That's Toronto should only be mad at themselves, and anything less than a 6-game suspension, I will be very angry as a Detroit Red Wings fan. Funny enough, against Ottawa, it seems like. And you know what? I think part of it is Ottawa does this to themselves. They're the type of team that really just agitates the other team. Brady Kachuk or Matthew Kachuk? Which one is on the Senators?
Brady is.
Brady. He's not as.
Always comes back to Brady,
There you go. It is full press radio live after all.
Rest assured, folks, we're going to bring this full circle because the point is, as he brings up the chippiness and the edginess, I think you're going to get this today. I mean, you got two teams that I know people use the term they hate each other. Okay, they hate each other because they've had a big game against each other in recent history, and right now they're competing in the biggest game of the season, so they hate each other. The reality of it is, it's two really good teams that are playing their very last game of the season with everything on the line. So I think both teams are very physical. I think you have guys on both teams that know how to push the limits, get under people's skin. I mean, Travis Kelce did an excellent job of that last week. I mean, I'm sitting here screaming at the TV to Baltimore. It's like, how do you lose that discipline? You know exactly what he's doing, and you fall for it every single time. I don't think the 49ers are going to do that, but I also think that it's going to get a little chippy pretty early on. And Braden, you brought up, the 49ers starting slow. This is exactly, they can't do that again because you saw last week Baltimore, they got off to a slow start. They never really found their offensive footing. But the problem was Kansas City didn't really either. They had those first couple good drives. I think they settled in, they got comfortable. So part of that might have been just game planning and saying, hey, like, look, Baltimore is really not doing anything to help themselves. But the point is, Baltimore tripped over themselves early on, lost that confidence, and completely abandoned what I thought should have been the game plan, and that is run the ball. I don't think San Francisco is going to do that. I think they are going to focus on running the ball. And I think, Brock Purdy's really good at making the right play at the right time. And I think if he gets that opportunity, unlike 4 years ago when Jimmy Garoppolo got that opportunity, he's going to cash in. So for Kansas City, they can't start slow. And actually, probably more importantly, they got to play a full 60 minutes here. This cannot be a 1 quarter rest on your defense and just grind it out the rest of the way. This is a game that they're going to have to go wire to wire with this team because I don't think the 49ers are going to start slow.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you look at how the Niners have started their 2 playoff games this year, but the Chiefs in Super Bowls. I mean, obviously, we touched on Super Bowl 55 a little bit already, which was a dumpster fire. But really, in their 2 Super Bowl wins, they've hardly led for much of the game either. You had the 10-point halftime deficit last year against Philadelphia. They were down by 10 points. I think it was still third quarter. Maybe when they started the comeback. I can't remember if it was fourth quarter before they kind of got back into it, but against the Niners already, that was a game that tied at halftime, and then San Francisco able to get those couple of takeaways. So Chiefs have really not played, like you said, a full 60 minutes in the Super Bowl in their last few years there. So it is going to be kind of interesting to see. I think Reed's done a pretty good job with the opening script in this playoff run. Kind of getting the ball out quick, throwing it to the middle of the field. You're seeing right now a good mix of run and pass. So I think it's kind of interesting to just look at the first quarter. How many points are maybe going to be put on the board here? Chiefs have at least gotten points on all their opening drives, but the Buffalo game, they had to settle for a couple of field goals before they got that touchdown to Kelce. So I think that first quarter, it's just going to be interesting to see maybe how aggressive each offensive coordinator is. Kyle Shanahan, I think really good coach, but sometimes can overthink some things. So like you said, if they're gonna try to pound it and run the rock, I wonder how long it's gonna take before maybe some of these quick passes go to maybe McCaffrey or Samuel kind of at the line of scrimmage. So just that first quarter to me is going to be really fascinating to see which team jumps out on top.
And Ian already mentioned the word full circle. I will kind of bring it back full circle, back to before I was Full Press fantasy managing editor, when I was working at Full Press Chiefs alongside Braden. It was Patrick Mahomes' first season starting, and we talked about in that 2018, I guess, that playoff run we had done. Braden, you and I, and I think there were a couple other people writing for Full Press Chiefs at the time, a roundtable as they prepared to play. I think it ended up being the Colts in the
Yeah.
playoffs of the divisional round that year. Funny enough, Patrick Mahomes' first playoff game was Andrew Luck's last playoff game. That's kind of a funny mirror image happening there. But I remember distinctly writing about how the Chiefs were, even though they were like third in points or second in points, whatever they were like 28th in time of possession through the season, and that they would need to learn how to control the clock more. Rely on the run game in order to win their playoff games. And sure enough, the very next year, Damian Williams has a great performance at the end of the season. Fantasy football managers will always remember that. Won a lot of titles for sure, but then also through the playoffs, how he was a key part of that comeback against the 49ers at a big run late. Isaiah Pacheco, now they have that weapon that can allow them to control the time of possession to the point where they just dominated time possession against a team, the Ravens, who typically does that to every other team. So it's It's funny how they got the Ravens out of their run game quickly, and I don't even know if it was them. That was more the Ravens that did that to themselves because Gus Edwards was having success on the ground. Certainly, you think Christian McCaffrey will as well. So yeah, Pacheco I think becomes really key to this. Now, there's two questions I have for Braden. One, and I know we already talked about it before the show, but this seems like the best defense the Chiefs have ever had. So I'm asking if that's true. But second, is Isaiah Pacheco the best running back that Patrick Mahomes has ever had?
Yeah, I would answer yes to both those questions. I think with Pacheco, it's just for this offense. I think a lot of people in the past, when it comes to draft stuff, or if there's like this big name free agent that was, really successful somewhere else, I think a lot of people always want to go with the speed, and kind of just stay with what the identity of the Reed offense has been here in Kansas City. But I think just the kind of physical runner that Pacheco is so kind of perfect for this offensive playbook, just because you can do so many different things. I think run in between the tackles or go outside zone, and I think he's just built perfectly for what this offense needs to when they need, like you said, that time of possession or need to kind of control the game a little bit. And defensively, I just think it's fascinating how many young guys have really stepped up quickly. You look at Trent McDuffie, of course, L'Jarius Sneed's a big part of this defense, but Trent McDuffie and that cornerback tandem, can kind of be kind of a Swiss Army knife for Steve Spagnuolo's defense. Kind of do a lot of different things, come off the edge with the blitz, line up outside or inside, and then George Karlaftis, was tied for the team lead in sacks this year. So there's a lot of young guys that have stepped up right away, and I just think that when you're a team like this that's playing for Super Bowls most years, you have to kind of hit on those young guys right away, and for the most part, they've stepped up. So I'd have to answer yes to both those questions.
And just to quickly touch on Pacheco again, Patrick Mahomes' importance of running back, not just running really well, which he does, but catching passes. And only had, look it up, he only had 13 receptions as a rookie. So I wonder if there was some hesitation this year. But I think it also shows running back receptions a lot of times aren't even tied to ability, it's tied to playing time because he played a lot more snaps this year. He just happened to be on the field more. It wasn't something where I don't think he had a ton of receptions in college either, but clearly he's capable. It's just simply being out there. And suddenly this year he has 44 receptions, even though he's not really considered a pass catching back. He will come off the field sometimes on third downs, but sometimes on early downs, Mahomes is still throwing. And if he needs to check down to a running back, if he just happened to be out there, Pacheco has shown 40, like his catch rate over his career is pretty great. 44 of 49 and 13 of 14 last year. So I think that dimension that he does bring to the game, I would also agree that he is the best running back in the Chiefs.
Well, Braden, you and I had actually spoken earlier this season when Pacheco was out and the importance of him to this offense. And, this is an offense that, I believe I saw a chart yesterday that they got 1,600 yards after the catch on passes behind the line of scrimmage, which I think was almost 400 yards more than the next closest team, which for folks out there that might be following me and listening to me, this is not supposed to be a negative. This is just pointing out a reality. It's just pointing out what this offense does. So, Pacheco's a big part of that. Obviously, Kelsey, Rashid Rice has stepped up, and they do a lot of stuff at the line of scrimmage. So, to me, when we were talking about Pacheco earlier and his importance to the running game and how they attack opposing defenses, his speed is hard to adjust, and his ability to kind of wiggle in between, these big bodies is impressive, especially for a guy who was a 7th round draft pick, which, is crazy to think that he, fell so far. But, this is something, though, that I thought was last week was going to be an issue. But I'm still going to bring it up. It wasn't because, well, again, for many reasons, the Ravens just didn't necessarily do what I think some people expected, or at least they weren't that competitive. But Joe Thuney is out again. And I know last week I spoke a lot about, I thought it was going to be a bigger factor. The Ravens really, I don't want to say they didn't take advantage of it because it wasn't like they got lit up defensively. But I thought there was going to be a lot more inside pressure and a lot more pressure on Mahomes. And it felt like he wasn't necessarily really, well, unless they were swinging an arm like a club, he wasn't really touched too much. You know what I mean? It felt like I thought there was going to be a lot more getting him off his spot than there actually was. It felt like the offense was more dictating what happened.
Wait, was Morgan Riley on the Ravens?
Yeah, he might have been. He might have been. Braden, do you see this as more of an issue this week? Because, you look at the 49ers defensive line, front seven and their defensive line. And again, the Chiefs have a really good offensive line, but again, their strength of their offensive line is that middle part. And I think it makes up for a lot of the some of the struggles of the tackles. Yeah, do you see this as a bigger issue this week than it was last week, or at least do you see San Francisco taking advantage of it a little bit more?
Yeah, it's tough because I think Ravens are probably a better defensive line, especially in the interior. I could see the San Francisco linebackers being asked to do a little bit more though than what Baltimore asked Roquan and Queen to do, because I think you just look at this 49ers defensive line. Outside of Nick Bosa, I think Eric Armstead's still a really good D tackle, but seems to kind of be playing through some injury stuff there right now. And Chase Young, it's kind of been a big disappointment there. You're seeing a lot of 49ers fans and even just some in the media talking about his effort. I think it was the Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown, kind of loafing around out there. So I don't really see this being maybe as difficult of a defensive line to face. I think you kind of look at just how the 49ers are constructed. I think back to last year, Andy Reid kind of running at Nick Bosa a lot, and something they've done in this playoff run, especially in that game without Tooney. You're seeing a lot of pulling guard action, also multiple tight end sets to kind of help out those offensive tackles. So to me, I guess with the matchup, I don't really think it's as daunting as what the Ravens really present, but I guess it's just going to be interesting to see how often Kansas City kind of runs at Bosa versus maybe running away from him, just because of how much Chase Young has kind of struggled since coming over via the trade.
Yeah, and look, you also have to consider too that you look at what the Ravens and how they attacked Kansas City, and like you guys were talking about earlier, the Kansas City defense is phenomenal, but they're not great at stopping the run. So it was puzzling why they didn't, the Ravens didn't use Lamar Jackson more, or at least attack the. I mean, they're a great running team, but yet they decided to try to screen the Chiefs to death, and that just didn't work for many reasons. But one of the, it was a poor choice of a game plan. I think the 49ers, another really good team on the ground, and by that I mean they can do a lot of screens that are actually successful. The Ravens struggled with that, but I think they are going to attack the Chiefs a lot on the ground, which I do think is going to add a little bit more pressure to that Chiefs offense as opposed to what the Ravens did. And I think with more pressure, I think because there's more mistakes. Some of them are minor, some of them are smaller, but like I said, I don't feel like the tackles, Donovan Smith and Tyrod Taylor, were necessarily challenged. Like I think they have been against some really good defensive teams, and we've seen when they've been challenged. And this isn't just with the Chiefs. I can speak to watching the Bucs closely last year. This was a problem with Donovan Smith before. It's not a conspiracy. He holds, and he gets
Right.
caught usually once or twice a game, and for whatever reason, it's always at a crucial point in time on a big third down or something. I think the 49ers, both what they do offensively, putting more pressure on what the Ravens did to the Chiefs last week, because like I said, the Chiefs didn't have their best offensive game, but they were never really threatened. We never saw the Ravens. The one time they did, they tripped over their own feet and fumbled through the back of the end zone. So like what I don't think the Chiefs were challenged in that sense. I think the 49ers are going to challenge them. Then I think it might lead to some more inconsistencies with the offense because there's a little bit more pressure being put on them.
Full circle, have the Chiefs, Braden, but have the Chiefs finally basically replaced Eric Fisher with Donovan Smith in terms of, they're probably like an average to maybe even above average left tackle. You would never call them elite. unfortunately Fisher was the first overall pick, so you'd love that result there. But the one thing that makes me think of the penalties at the crucial moments, which I'm sure we don't want to revisit. So I'm sorry I brought that up, Brayden. Go ahead.
No, you're good. It is interesting though because Donovan Smith had that kind of neck stinger injury. He was trying to play through it around Thanksgiving, and it actually looked like the rookie Wanya Morris was going to kind of solidify himself in that job. Was playing pretty decent, I would say, not great or anything, but looked like he was going to actually kind of be that left tackle in the playoffs, and then he suffers an injury in the regular season finale. So it is kind of interesting how that left tackle spot has been a little bit more, I guess, back and forth, up and down than what's happened with right tackle and Jawan Taylor, even with all the headlines surrounding him this season.
Taylor's ruined the Chiefs, right? I keep seeing that, so it's like, man, people are really harsh on Jawan Taylor because I know he's taken a lot of penalties too. But I was also watching some Chiefs game early in the year, and they were showing stats that like he had one of the highest, longest amount of seconds until pressure rate on average. So like the one thing is you can either, as an offensive lineman, like you ideally want to be just like Trent Williams, great in protection and never take penalties, but you can, a lot of offensive linemen are one or the other. You're either going to take a lot of penalties or you're going to be efficient in pass protection. So at least like Jawan Taylor's not both, right? He takes a lot of penalties, but it does seem like he's a pretty decent protector when he's playing within the rules.
Part of it too is the play style of the quarterback. It adds a different set of tasks, so to speak, for these offensive linemen who, a traditional drop back quarterback, it's a little bit more predictable where they might be and where these linemen have to be. Whereas if you're a left tackle and, for better or worse, I'm not saying this is a bad or good thing, but, you could be dropping back in pass protection only to look around you and see Patrick Mahomes not even in sight. So, some of these issues kind of pop up. Sometimes they're ahead of them, sometimes they're not. And I think, again, I mean, there's not many offensive linemen out there short of Trent Williams that are going to be perfect. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Brandon Revenberg, maybe. Brandon Revenberg's always amazing.
Yeah,
CFL reference. He's the best guard in the CFL.
I was just going to say, what is this, a CFL reference?
It is, yeah. I love Brandon Revenberg.
But yeah, no, look, I think when you look at it, I think that the Tooney thing, I'm still concerned about it because, again, he's really good. And I do think a combination of both the 49ers defensive game plan and also just what they do I think they're just going to be so far more effective. That's why I think it's crucial that the Chiefs, I think it's more so important now for them to play that 60 minutes, because I just don't think the 49ers, even if they get off to a slightly slow start, we saw last week, dropping 35 points is not going to be an issue for them. It might be more difficult against a team that doesn't give up over 30 points. But the point is they can put up 25 to 30 points, and that you would think would be enough to win this game if they can do that.
Yeah, and I think them just being able to get those comebacks in the playoffs too already, I think that was maybe a storyline that wasn't talked about enough just because of the Kyle Shanahan stats of, obviously they don't trail much going into the fourth quarter, but having that 0 for 30 something, record, trailing by at least 8 points going into the fourth quarter, I think that was huge for them to show that they could at least come back with this group these last couple of games.
Yeah, and I was just going to say it does speak volumes because, again, I mean, this is a team that Kyle Shanahan obviously was the offensive coordinator with Atlanta when they had the lead against the Patriots. He was the head coach.
Tooney's rookie season.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough hurdle for him to overcome, and it's a pretty fascinating number when you're 0 for that many in situations like that. That's pretty crazy. It's like the that Aaron Rodgers stat, like 2 for like 40 something or other, like when the team's like down by like more than a touchdown in the I don't know. It's some silly.
I'm going to say in the NFC Championship game.
Well, that is 0 for whatever or 1 for whatever. But
I mean, it was Jay Cutler and the Bears. I don't even know if that
right. Well, but that's the thing though. It's like it's one of those stats where it's like it doesn't make sense that it's actually a real stat, but you think about it and you're like, well, you go back to that last Super Bowl and it's like they weren't faced with a deficit, but they didn't know how to close out games either. And that's a big problem. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand, because I think there's a lot of similar qualities in teams that can close out games consistently and who can really fight back from any deficit. We've seen that with the Chiefs for the number of years now. It doesn't really matter how big of a deficit they're in. There's always a chance they're going to come back. And even if they have a poor game for 3.5 quarters, they get the lead late, they're going to close it out. The 49ers haven't been able to prove that at all over this 4 or 5 year run of theirs. That comeback last week was the first time you're like, wow, okay. If they fall behind against Kansas City, I actually think they might be able to come back. Now, it's not ideal. You don't want to do that, but they showed a little something is what I'm trying to say last week.
Well, you referenced it earlier. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like I think there's so many numbers to show that Brock Purdy is much better than Garoppolo. But like, you got who did Shanahan go with the first Super Bowl? NFL MVP Matt Ryan. Clearly, the last pick of the draft is Brock Purdy is way better.
Forget about numbers. Brock Purdy has a killer instinct that Jimmy Garoppolo could only wish that he had. There's no metric. There's no EPA chart that's going to say no. This is what. No, it just watch them play. Some guys have it. Some guys don't. Patrick Mahomes has it. He's got it in spades. Jimmy Garoppolo, not so much. Brock Purdy, he's connecting on that deep pass and closing out that game against the Chiefs 4 years ago. Jimmy Garoppolo,
Sanders for sure.
So, killer instinct.
So to your point earlier, though, the quarterback, right? This quarterback gives Shanahan more confidence, because part of it with the Chiefs is they never panic, even if they're down. And once they start coming back, it seems like the other team does panic. Oh, here we go again, right? And does Brock Purdy give this team enough confidence that they don't panic if they end up with a big lead and the Chiefs start coming back? Or because the other thing too, if you talk about the Chiefs' importance of starting fast, the 49ers have not started well at all in the playoffs yet. So both times they've started out slow. That's something where, what if the Chiefs get a massive lead in the first quarter? I don't know if it'd be 3 scores at halftime like it was against the Lions, but it seems like the Chiefs won't necessarily collapse like the Lions will. Like if they've got a 3-score at halftime, it's probably over. Like the 49ers might be able to make it interesting close-wise, but I don't think they'll be able to come back from that big a deficit. I don't think the Chiefs will make as many mistakes as the Lions will to allow something like that to happen. So I think, to be honest, both teams, I think, have a huge emphasis to start quickly and not let the other team get ahead.
Well, we've seen also too. I mean, and this is the thing. I do believe it'd be tough for the 49ers to come back against the Chiefs in that sense. But at the same time, like if the Chiefs go out and go up 14 points in the first quarter, I'm not writing them off, because again, we saw it. It's a weird thing where it's like, they play. I've never seen a great offensive team. And Braden can attest to this. I've never seen a great offensive team have so many like lulls for a half. Like I feel like, and maybe this is more, maybe just the perception's not quite reality. But I feel like the Chiefs, we talk more about the Chiefs being shut out or held to like 3 points and a half more than I think a lot of these other teams. And it is puzzling, because it's like, they could look great like they did against Baltimore in the first quarter and a half, and then fail to score a touchdown the rest of the game. And it's like, wait, really? How could you get 2 different teams in one game? Again, I said it at the beginning, the Chiefs can't do that today. So if they do jump out to a lead, I think it's going to be tough for the 49ers to come back. But I'm not necessarily panicking at this point, because I need to see if the Chiefs can maintain what they're doing the entire game. Because if they do, a couple years ago, they go up 3 scores. You pretty much bank on them at least probably scoring a couple more touchdowns. The game's really not going to be close, and they're going to, ride off into the sunset. Here, it's like they could look like the best team that's ever stepped foot on a football field for the first quarter, and then fail to move the ball past midfield for the remaining 3 quarters. So it's puzzling. It's a puzzling thing for me to come to grips with, because it's like, I want to write the 49ers off, but I still won't be able to. Maybe I'll lay down a bet if they fall down early that they'll come back. Maybe I'll have a nice little payday if they do. But so yeah, to you guys' point, I think both teams they you can't have the starts. You can't start slow. I think it's more important. I think it's more important for Kansas City to start quick than the 49ers. But I think you just can't. I don't know. This is one of those teams where it's like these teams need to dictate the pace of play depending on how they play the game, not the other way around. So,
and I think maybe I'll agree with you in the sense that the 49ers just proved that they could start slow in 2 playoff games and still come back to win. Now, Jordan Love's first ever playoff game, and the loser Lions aren't nearly the opponent that the Chiefs are. So, but they have proven they can come back. So,
and again, Braden, you can answer this question better than anyone. I'd say this 49ers team is probably right up there in terms of quality of teams that this Chiefs team has played in the playoffs. And look, I'm not taking anything away from going out and playing the Ravens. I don't think anyone will sit here and say that the Ravens came with their A game. Miami, again, they didn't beat a team with a winning record, not named the Cowboys, who coincidentally didn't beat a team with a winning record. So how do you reconcile that? I don't know. Throughout the other playoffs in the past, Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not putting a lot of stock into that. I'm not trying to downplay their opponents. I'm just trying to emphasize, I think this 49ers team is different, like in terms of quality and what they faced, certainly in I don't want to say in the Super Bowl because they did play Brady and the Bucs, so I think are better than this 49ers team, but I don't think they're that much better in terms of certainly versus their other opponents. I think the Eagles last year were pretty good. I think the 49ers from 4 years ago, they're pretty good. Again, Jimmy Garoppolo really brings them down quite a bit. So I'm really hoping I'm not setting myself up for the Patriots to bring him back in some capacity. So I again, cross my fingers.
They've got Nathan Rourke. They're fine.
Yes,
they don't even need to draft a quarterback. Just give the keys to Nathan Rourke. They'll pay $900,000 to him this year. It'll be great.
But Braden, so would you agree that this is again? I'm not going to say it's their toughest opponent because I'll live and die with that being the either the 49ers, either the Bucs or the Patriots from 2018 as their 2 toughest opponents. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely think it's better than Baltimore. I think it maybe took me a little while to really sit back and kind of maybe size up Baltimore a little bit more correctly, I guess, for how they matched up. But yeah, I think with the 49ers, it kind of reminds me of the Rams, I guess, a couple of years ago, where I guess just their philosophy of team building, you got a lot of aggressive moves to kind of get these stars, and it's kind of really interesting to see where their weak points are. You look at the offensive line outside of, you probably have the best left tackle in the game, and then outside of that, it's a lot of guys that have really kind of struggled to play consistently around him on the offensive line, which is it's just a really interesting dynamic in this offensive system. And then you look at the defense right now. I think Charvarius Ward's played really, really well since coming over from Kansas City, but the rest of the secondary is been a little bit suspect. So it's kind of interesting where the weak points are. You kind of have a really good, solid foundation, guy to kind of lean on in certain units, but the rest of the unit is kind of lacking in depth. I think you look at the homegrown guys like Kittle. You look at Deebo Samuel, who was also in that Super Bowl 4 years ago. I know he's only a fullback, but Kyle Juszczyk's been a piece. Kyle Shanahan's leaned on a lot as well. So it's kind of interesting. I think the homegrown guys are really what really makes this foundation great. But then you go out and get Christian McCaffrey last year, and I think that's the move that's really kind of put them over the top. Which running back, I know a lot of people say they don't matter, but McCaffrey, I think just with this offensive system, has really kind of put them over the top. So I do think it's probably up there with one of the best teams, but it's just a fascinating kind of stars versus scrubs debate for really how far this depth can really take them, kind of like the Rams a couple of years ago, in my opinion.
Every running back in the league is cheering for the 49ers because they want to be like, look, you paid the guy, he won you the Super Bowl, so pay running backs.
Unfortunately, for all those other running backs, there's no other running back in the league like Christian McCaffrey. And look, I do want to clarify too that, sometimes it's, maybe it was the Chiefs that made the Ravens look the way they did, because we sit there and we talk about, the Ravens, were they a great 1 seed? I don't know. I don't seem to recall most people talking about how they would just, because look, I mean, the top seed in the AFC changed hands how many times late in the season, and then so I don't think anyone was sitting there saying like, oh, this team has just been in first place all season, just running
thought it was going to be the Dolphins at one point, to be honest.
Yeah, the Dolphins, the Jaguars were in first place at one point. At a significant point of the season. So
what a memory there, that so long ago.
So I'm not trying to sit there and say, oh, the Ravens weren't really good, that was an easy win for the Chiefs. No, I mean, it very well could be that the Chiefs forced them to play one of their worst games all season. I just think that, look, obviously, my bias is being, when you're going up against a team that has Tom Brady as your quarterback, that's likely going to be your toughest opponent. And credit where credit's due. I mean, in that first matchup in 2018, it came down to an overtime drive that, that's what happened. Obviously, the Super Bowl is a little bit different, but, it's not like anyone's sitting there saying Mahomes can't play in the suit. No, he clearly can. It's just, unfortunately, he went up against, Tom Brady, who pretty much was born in
losses in his career, right? Mahomes?
What? Yeah.
What's
two to Brady, 1 to Burrow. So
that was going to be my point, is that most of his playoff losses are to Brady. So
right. And that's where it's like, when you talk about, and this is kind of a good chance to bring up kind of a little bit of a legacy talk. And look, it sounds like nitpicking, but it does get to a nitpicking part when you talk about these quarterbacks. So you talk about those 3 matchups against Burrow. Obviously, they own Josh Allen. It's just, it is what it is. I think that's the best quarterback that they beat is Josh Allen.
Yeah, and his numbers for his career playoff games are pretty insane, honestly.
Right, and it's like, you think about, okay, he had 2 opportunities against Brady. Unfortunately, he's not going to get another one unless Brady comes back, and hey, I hope that's the case. That's not going to happen. Trust me. That's just my delusional, pipe dream. But 2 matchups against Brady came out a short end. Burrow, again, everyone likes hyping up Burrow. I think he's an excellent quarterback, although at this point I kind of need to see him stay healthy before I start continuing to anoint him one of the best in the league.
And that's where my brain was going to go, is that if they did beat Burrow, would you take Burrow over Allen? Clearly, you're taking Josh Allen.
Because I think Josh Allen has I think he's done more consistently and he stayed healthier. But outside of that, Baker Mayfield, Deshaun Watson,
Tua,
Andrew Luck.
Actually, Andrew Luck's probably up there, to be honest.
Well,
even late in his career, I know with the injuries, but
yes and no. Like I'd say it's tough, because it's like I'd say yes, but at the same time, I watched the Patriots and Brady. Look, they humiliated that Colts franchise pretty much every game after Manning left.
Championship Sunday 2014, my least favorite football day ever.
Yeah, it was. Look, I saw the Colts walking in. It was the greatest day. Either that or the Steelers, which is incredible. But the point is, you list those quarterbacks, and I know it's not quarterback versus quarterback, but I think it's a good indicator of just kind of in general where the team's at. So yeah, have they had some fortunate matchups? Sure, absolutely. If you want to compare, like I said, this goes back to sometimes we nitpick because we're comparing 2 quarterbacks that, well, when you're going to sit here and compare Brady and Mahomes, well, I am going to nitpick. I'm going to say, well, you can argue that outside of, Brady himself, the very first playoff game that Tom Brady played, I think he played a better quarterback than what Mahomes has ever played in the playoffs, in Kurt Warner.
That wasn't his first playoff game. This is his first Super Bowl.
I'm sorry, first Super Bowl. First playoff game, Rich Gannon, which he won an MVP the following season, which you can argue maybe not better than Josh Allen. But again,
I would probably.
We're talking about, we're talking. It was certainly a tougher task. So again, we're nitpicking here when it comes to two great quarterbacks, one who could very well be, depending on how you value what happens today, win or lose, or
I mean, if you're making a pro Mahomes argument, like you
no,
have to
I
say,
am.
well, I mean, to anyone making a pro Mahomes argument, you'd have to say Brady has beaten the better quarterback in the playoffs in the Super Bowl because he beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl.
Right. Again, we can look at surface things and say, yes, if he wins this weekend, yes, 3 Super Bowls, it's a great, you can argue. I think someone put him, would argue somewhere in the 4, 5, 6, 7 range, and I'm okay with that because I
Super
think
Bowls, I'd probably put him top 6 for sure.
Yeah, and
I'd put him ahead of Rodgers. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of nuance. I know these debates kind of devolve into rings and per game stats because again, per game is obviously it's obviously gonna favor Mahomes because he's grown up in this era of offensive football. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying let's give a little nuance to these discussions, and that nuance involves, well, let's dive deep into how they got to these championships and what they did to do it. And when you do that, I think it's still very clear at this point. I don't want to say very clear, but I do think it's an advantage for Brady. Look, I personally don't think the conversation should be happening because I think there's just too big of a gap. And despite the pace argument, pace doesn't guarantee anything in the future. All pace is just telling you what you've already done. It doesn't guarantee you any future success. And I think that the gap, which is, as I brought up before, is essentially a Dan Marino regular season career. And at this point, 5 Super Bowls, best case scenario, 4 Super Bowls if he wins today. That's a pretty massive gap. And to assume that a football player can well, at his quote unquote current pace, it would take him until he was 41 years old just to match those numbers. So I don't think it's an appropriate thing to assume that will happen and just chalk it up as likely, even though it's quote unquote on pace, because again, there's so many variables. So, again, it's a tough thing to describe, although I do think, especially if he wins today, and if he has a really great, I think he could really use a great signature performance in a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because and as it's a funny way it turns out, but I think as crazy as it is, the most iconic play of Mahomes in a Super Bowl is an incomplete pass in the game they lost
on Twitter all the time.
Well, I mean, that's my point though. Like no one's sitting there saying, "Oh, look at that big throw to Tyreek Hill against the 49ers." I mean, yeah, it was a nice throw, but it was, you know what I mean? And so I'm not trying to downplay it. This is a product of the fans. I mean, if the fans didn't constantly bring up that throw, then I wouldn't be talking about it.
Ever in NFL history.
But do I mean, I have a point though, right? If there was other signature
I'm the smartest
moments,
idiot, so in the world, but that doesn't mean anything.
But that's what I'm saying. So it's nuanced. So if he goes out, because look, worst case scenario, if you're a Patrick Mahomes fan and you're a Chiefs fan, is they go out and get blown out like they did against the Buccaneers. All of a sudden, you're talking about 4 play. Because look, if I want to be a jerk, an a-hole, I can sit here and probably make a case that 10 of the 12 Super Bowl quarters that Patrick Mahomes has played has been less than stellar and at some points subpar.
Yeah. I'm
not going to do that. But if you get another repeat of what happened against the Bucs, I think there's some serious questions. And I think his quote unquote legacy takes a huge hit because now all of a sudden you're talking about a guy who, if you want to get into the nuances of things, I can make an argument that Brady's never had a performance as poor as Mahomes had in Super Bowl 55. Even in his loss, well, certainly not the Eagles' loss, but the loss to the Giants twice. So that's why I'm saying I think Mahomes
14 points the first time, right?
Right, and for better or worse, he walked off the field with a lead with 90 seconds left against the Giants in Super Bowl 42.
The Chiefs never held a lead in that Bucs game, I don't think.
Right, no, it was. I mean, that game was pretty. Actually, no, didn't they kick the Didn't they get the first field goal?
I can't really remember. I
mean,
I might look that up.
Either way, the point is, I think the best thing, obviously, is to win this game. But I really think Mahomes could use just a signature, like, I mean, look, people say that Brady got carried through his first 3 Super Bowls, but that Super Bowl against Carolina, I mean, anyone who actually watched it, no one who actually watched that happen is going to sit there and say he got carried at any point. And that was a signature moment in his second Super Bowl. And you can argue might be better than any one of Patrick Mahomes' Super Bowl performances to this point. And then Brady has a few more that are better than that, which is what I'm getting at. So if you want to be that guy, Patrick Mahomes really does need that type of performance in the Super Bowl. But outside of that, I think his legacy is 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you can discuss and go from there and make a determination based on those other guys around him.
Yeah, I guess.
And you were correct. I just looked it up. Sorry, Braden. But yeah, Harrison Butker started the game. So the Chiefs did actually held the lead in that game. 3-0, and then it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, it was very much downhill from there.
Sorry, Braden.
No, you're good. I think Mahomes said it best on whatever media day it was this year. I think it's too early to make those comparisons. I'm kind of surprised how many people are making it. I know some people have to kind of do it because it's their gimmick and what they're kind of doing for their job. But
That's
yeah,
right.
I don't really I don't know if you can even come close to making that comparison yet. I think you look at, just like you said, his Super Bowl moments. I guess I've kind of maybe missed a lot of the talk about the incomplete pass, but yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. You look at you mentioned the 49ers play, the Tyreek Hill. I think actually him using his legs is kind of the one that I remember the most last year.
Yeah,
with
I apologize. Yeah, that was a signature moment. Great play. So I forgot about that. So my apologies.
Building on Mahomes, he's had some really signature playoff moments, but not like a lot of them have not come in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I think it's just interesting now. Like you said, it's just it's almost been more his decision making and his legs, I think, at times, than, like you said, some of the throws or anything like that.
And to talk about decision making, like, the quarterbacks who, I know Ian will talk about this, like, it's not as aesthetically impressive, but for Brady to, like, quickly throw a ball downfield, like right after the snap, read, react, throw accurately, right where it needs to be, right, perfect velocity. That's incredibly impressive. It just doesn't look as flashy as like Lamar Jackson's touchdown last week. It was probably the best thing, maybe best football player we've seen all year. The weaving in and out of the pocket to then, finding the space, stepping up, making an incredible throw to the end zone. And a great catch by Zay Flowers too at the end. But
well,
like, Brady could do that without it, the complicated of in and out of the pocket. He would just make it right away, right? Like, and so.
And I think a guy like Patrick Mahomes understand. Like, when we talk about stuff like this, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is one of the smartest players in the league right now. He understands this. And if you go back to, we're throwing it back to 2018 a lot in years past. So, like, I remember saying at times, it's like, look, if he stayed in the pocket more, he'd become a better quarterback. And we've seen him get much better at he's still, again, every so often, it's a safety switch for players. They go to their comfort zone. So if he gets on, if things aren't going quite well, every so often he's going to scramble maybe a little bit too early and whatever. But compared to what it was early on in his career, I think it's made him a much, much better quarterback. And people will sit there and say, "Oh, 2018 was great." I'm like, 2018 I think was phenomenal. But I also think it was just a perfect storm of kind of everything. And then the league just not really having anything on this offense and not respecting what Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And look, to his credit, Patrick Mahomes' talent created. But he didn't become a great quarterback, so to speak, until he realized how to play the position better. Like, you can only rely on your athleticism so much. And people talk about extending plays all the time outside of the pocket. They're more impressed by that or whatever. But when you can extend plays before the ball snapped, that's where you win as a quarterback. And that's where you become great, and levels of greatness beyond just the highlight reel, because everyone can come up with a highlight reel. I can find a high school quarterback scrambling around, throwing a ball and making it look like the most beautiful thing in the world. I don't care about that. I really don't. I like accuracy and arm strength and decision making. That's what I like. And I think, again, we've seen Patrick Mahomes over the years get better and more comfortable in the pocket, to the point where not just his arm, but his legs. And this all comes back to decision making. This isn't a quarterback that's scrambling and using his athleticism. I mean, like I said, there are times that he does that, but I'm talking about the conscious effort and the conscious attempt to use his legs and attack the weaknesses that are presented to him. Just like a quarterback does with his arm, Patrick Mahomes does with his legs. So I think that goes hand in hand. So it's not always just about throwing, but for him, it's about scrambling and running at the right time, not just scrambling around just to out athleticize someone.
But I think at this point, even if he wins today, I still don't think he reaches, like, the top three to me are still locked in terms of Brady, Otto Graham, and Joe Montana. Part of that is, again, their mental prowess playing quarterback, how they could make quick decisions and put the football in places very quickly, to where you're mitigating pass rush, because you're not giving them any time to get to you. It's why Brady's taken so few sacks over his career. I think Montana did that really well too. And just for those three guys, how much they won. So, but I think if Mahomes wins today, I think you can start talking about, like, where does he rank compared to Johnny Unitas, who is often considered one of the best. I mean, I think they'd both have 3 championships if he wins today. So, like,
Well, and
Peyton Manning, I mean, he'd have more Super Bowls than Peyton
right.
Manning. So,
well, and that's something too. That's where I think the discussion is fascinating. Like I said, I get fed up with he's on pace to be the GOAT, or he's this, he's that. I'm like, I don't think it's necessarily an appropriate discussion until, and I'll preface this by saying it's not all about championships. Let me be very clear. Tom Brady retired as the league leader in both regular season and postseason in touchdowns, wins, yards, game-winning drives, comeback drives, Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl MVP. I mean, I can keep going for the next 20 minutes. Like, he was literally the top of that list. So when people say, well, if Mahomes gets 4 or 5, well, I know, no, it's not all about rings. It's about everything. That's the bar, okay? There's no lowering it as much as you want. So, yeah, I'm gonna push back at people comparing him to Brady. I don't care what their first 6 seasons are like. I know why you're arguing it, because, again, of course it's going to favor an offensive player, or a quarterback in a pass-friendly era of offense with a offensive-minded head coach and far better weapons. I mean, that's not a debate. That's just a fact. So I don't really care about the per-game stats, because you know what? Middle of next season, those could be lower, and he couldn't have those stats. I mean, Brock Purdy may have those per game numbers by when it's all said and done. I don't care about those. So to me, for Patrick Mahomes, for that discussion to really, I think, be appropriate, he has to get to 5 Super Bowls. And by that, I mean, there's no one in front of him except for Brady. There's no one behind him. Now, with the exception of the Otto Grahams, the Bart Stars of the world, where you're talking about NFL championships, and you know what I mean. So I'm not dismissing those, but I'm not holding them to the same standard as a Super Bowl championship, just based on the construction of the league and how you have to win it. I mean, I think that's
fair. With 5. I know Star has 5 championships. I think Otto Graham has 7 championships.
Yes.
3 of those are not NFL championships. They're the league that the Browns were in before, the AAAAF or whatever it was.
So when people,
he would only, so to your point, 5 would make it that the only person ahead of him in Super Bowls and championships.
And he would be clear of Montana. Now, again, like I said, people take that as, rings only matter. I'm like, no. You have to get the accolades too. I think rings matter more. But it's about the big picture. So for me, I don't think it's an appropriate conversation until at least he gets to 5. And at that point, I'm still going to say no, because, again, in order for him to match those numbers, and I brought up earlier just the career numbers, he would have to average 5,000 yards a season and 37 touchdowns for the next 12 years straight. He just came off a 27 and 4,100. I'm not saying he can't reach those numbers in other seasons,
Yeah.
But in order to just assume that he's going to do that for 12 years, just to match. Again, this isn't to crush his numbers as people suggest, just to match is impressive. And that would take him to 41. Now, if he does it, that's impressive. But again, how many quarterbacks have been effective after 40?
One. Yeah.
One single guy in the history of this league. We saw Peyton Manning, due to injuries, fall off a cliff. We talked about the advantages Mahomes has, and it's his legs. You think his legs are going to be the same at 38 as opposed to 28, what he is now? No. That's one of the advantages Brady had, was that he didn't rely on his athleticism to create an advantage. And I think that's a great advantage for Mahomes now, but that's going to be a factor. Mahomes started with elite talent. Brady didn't play with an all-pro receiver until his 108th game with Randy Moss.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of factors that go into it where for me, I think it's impossible to project this far into the future. So I think it's an inappropriate conversation to have. But the great conversations that we're missing out on are the Johnny Unitas. How does he approach Joe Montana coming up? What happens with Peyton Manning? What about John? I know people hate in Chiefs Kingdom, they hate John Elway. But what about John Elway? What about those guys, that group of quarterbacks that I believe he's in right now, especially if he wins a third Super Bowl. Like I said, if he loses, I think it opens the door for a much different conversation. But right now, I think that's the group that he's in. There's so many great conversations we could be having, but unfortunately, most of it is the cheap,
Elway's a good comparison, especially if he loses, right? Where he and Elway will have had the same number of Super Bowl wins. Yeah, I think Elway would still have one extra appearance at this point now.
Right, yeah, he had 5
and 6 years, which is still impressive. But.
And when he retired, it was the most Super Bowl appearances by a quarterback. Now, again, this goes back to my previous point. Not only
Brady had not played a single game in the NFL at that point,
but there are categories where Brady has such a significant amount more. Like again, total appearances by a quarterback. The most before Brady, 5. The most now, 10. He doubled it.
I actually thought it was 9. I even forgot that he went to 10.
Yeah.
Like it's
So I think there's a lot of legacy building for Mahomes' potential here, and if he wins, obviously technically he gets quote unquote closer to Brady. But I say it all the time, and I'm going to use a 16 game schedule for the math because that's just what I have stuck in my head. But if say a quarterback in his first 2 weeks of the season throws 6 touchdowns and 5, he'd be on pace to throw 88 touchdowns that season technically. No one, in all seriousness, is going to sit there and say he's on pace to throw 88 touchdowns because we understand the law of averages and how things even out. It's the exact same thing right now with Patrick Mahomes. So, let's see how his career plays out, but let's see it take those steps. And like I said, taking those steps includes, climbing the ladder, which I think he's doing. And like I said, he wins today. You can have a great conversation with a handful of quarterbacks. It just won't include Tom Brady.
And you've always said, appreciate Mahomes' career for what it is. Stop comparing to Brady. Just enjoy it for what it is, because it is incredibly impressive.
What happens, and like I said, I think it's a far safer bet to sit here and say he's going to fall short of those numbers. What happens when he falls short of those? And people are like, well, he sucked. No, he didn't suck. You just spent 15 years trying to push him to the level of Tom Brady. He inevitably failed at that, which is not a negative. And now you think it's the Aaron Rodgers effect. Everyone thinks look, he deserves some criticism. He's had some shortcomings in big games, but people think that he's had a career that's been a waste because, well, he only went to one Super Bowl. You know how hard it is to go to the Super Bowl? You know how hard it is to win the Super Bowl? Like,
I can't even imagine how difficult it is, to be honest.
Well,
but yeah.
Well, it's like, for example, I'm in a conversation with one fan recently, and they're like, well, look, if he wins today, well, he's won 3 Super Bowls in his next 6 years. So by the time he's 34, he should have 6 Super. I'm like,
hey, the greatest quarterback of all time went a whole decade without winning a Super Bowl. So you can't take anything for granted.
So anyways,
now, of course, during that time he was winning MVPs, and he was like, during that time, they always made the playoffs. It's not like
undefeated season. They were, again, 90 seconds away from going. That's my favorite thing. Like, I think finishing the job and winning is a big factor. But like, I'm not going to sit here and say that, like some people say, oh, he couldn't even win with Randy Moss. I'm like,
he just won 7 other Super Bowls without Randy Moss.
They were 90 seconds away from being 19-0. Did they fail to close out the job? Yes. But like, come on, people, use your head. It doesn't mean that they were bad or failed to win anything. I understand it's a disappointment and it's something I will have to live with the rest of my life. But they were 90 seconds from going 19-0, people. Like use your head here. Like let's get out of these narrative things. So anyways, I know we started going off on quarterbacks, but the point is you have a legacy building opportunity for Patrick Mahomes. And I think the most important or the biggest thing for him is to keep that pace. I think he has to go out and have not just a Super Bowl MVP performance, but I mean like a memorable. I want him to have a performance where people finally forget about the incomplete pass. Like, retire ever showing that pass again. You may still love it, folks, but if you're a Chiefs fan, you want to have so many different clips to choose from in this game that you're not going to revert back. You're going to forget about that. You're going to be like, that's an incomplete pass. I don't care about incomplete passes. Do you think anyone celebrates the Tom Brady to Randy Moss incomplete pass in that game that literally traveled 73 yards, hash to hash,
There's
that
one
landed in his hand?
Walker in the next Giants loss too.
I'm talking. In this case,
constantly does it though. It's not just one play.
But I'm talking about a near impossible throw to make because what's the Patrick Mahomes incomplete cool looking? Absolutely. It wasn't just your standard like throw the ball, drop the pass. Same thing with Brady. Rolls out, throws from about the 13-yard line to the whatever. Like I said, the yard line to yard line distance was 67 yards, but it went hash to hash. So by math, I think it works out to be about 73 yards. So again, no one's celebrating that. So like, if you're a Chiefs fan, you want to see the highlight reel fill up with these great plays and for him to really forge his legacy as a great Super Bowl quarterback, which I think arguably he may or may not have done so far. Is that too harsh?
No, and I wish I I wish I was old enough to remember all of Brady's Super Bowls. So yeah, that 07 one was kind of the I remember parts of the Eagles one, but yeah, that was really the first full game that I really gotta see. So you mentioned that Panthers one earlier. It's something I've obviously been able to see like highlights and stuff, but I wish that was a game I was able to remember live for sure.
Yeah, and like Panthers scored 18 points in the fourth quarter of that game. So you're talking about going back and forth. That the Panthers had scored 2 like huge touchdowns, and it was like, oh my god, which makes it funny that the theme is that the Patriots or Brady in particular was carried by his defense, but I think that the Patriots defense has been god awful in fourth quarters of Super Bowls. Like, they've blown some massive leads. Even in that first Super Bowl against the Rams, they blew a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. They blew a multiple double-digit leads against the Panthers. The Eagles, they pretty much were in control the whole game. Obviously, the 2 Giants Super Bowls were testy, but I mean, you fall behind against the Seahawks. I mean, you're getting blown out against the Falcons, and it wasn't just because of the Brady pick 6. I mean, they dropped the ball multiple times. The Eagles Super Bowl, I mean, I don't need to speak about that. So, again, like it's funny how narratives work, but I think the real narrative that exists now is, what does Patrick Mahomes do from this point on, and how does he perform here? Because say the reverse happens. What happens if Brock Purdy goes out and has a Steve Young type game? 6 touchdown passes. All of a sudden, Brock Purdy in 2 years have gone to back-to-back NFC Championship games. Unfortunately, he got injured last year, but when he came back, miraculously, from an elbow injury, didn't miss a game. He comes back, leads the 49ers to a Super Bowl, and he had a stellar statistical season. So now all of a sudden, what happens? Now is Brock Purdy on pace? What are we going to do here? Is Brock Purdy now the best quarterback in the NFL? No. I don't care what happens. Brock Purdy could outperform Patrick Mahomes in this game. He's not going to be the best quarterback in the league going into next season. That's still going to be Patrick Mahomes. He has that equity. But how long will it take for the narrative to shift? So, anyways, we've been on for over an hour actually. Let's pick this game. Let's pick this game and go home, and I'll let Braden kind of get those nerves going, because there's still 6.5 effing hours before this game starts. Actually, based on the NFL, probably about 7 hours actually. But let's pick this game before the season. And I've reminded everyone that I did pick the Ravens and the 49ers to make it to the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, I only got half right. However, the half I did get right was the team that I actually picked to win the game. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to go with the 49ers. I think they're going to win this game 28-21. This is not a game. I don't think you're going to get high scoring game, because I think both these defenses are good. This will constitute a high scoring game between these two teams based on how their two defenses played. Obviously, we know that the Chiefs, I don't think, have let up more than 27 points all season or something like that.
Right.
The 49ers obviously are an offensive powerhouse when they're on top of their game. So I do think that 28 points for the 49ers will be enough, because I don't think, based on what we've seen, I don't think the Chiefs offense was ultimately going to I don't think that they're going to be able to score that much against the 49ers. So I think the 49ers finally get over that hump. You know, they've been knocking on the door for years now. But the big difference here is they got Christian McCaffrey and they got a better quarterback. And I think ultimately that's going to be what spells the victory for the 49ers. So I like the 49ers 28-21.
Well, Ian already referenced his preseason Super Bowl picks. I might as well do the same with mine. I did pick the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl, but to lose to the Eagles in a repeat of last year, and it would be reverse the results. So unlike Ian, though, I don't have my winner still alive, but I think I will still go with the Chiefs. Seems so tough to bet against Mahomes in these moments. We talked about the defense as well. Is that this really does seem like a game where the Chiefs defense will need to step up, like they did against the Ravens. Because I think, like you talked about the Zay Flowers fumble, it wasn't like he just dropped the ball out of nowhere. Like, this was L'Jarius Sneed coming in and forcing him to make the mistake. A split second later, he's past the end zone line, and it's a whole different game. So, like, this Chief,
By the way,
is making plays.
By the way, I'm going to use this to get on my soapbox real quick. Phenomenal rule. I hope
I agree.
keep it. I hope they keep it. This idea that the offense should be somehow rewarded for fumbling into the end zone. Get out of here with this. All right, get out of here. Keep it. It's a great rule, and that's it. This play was a perfect example, because just play smarter. You shouldn't be rewarded for playing dumb football on the goal line. I mean, it's as simple as that. So
did he I don't think he fumbled it through the line. I think the Chiefs just recovered it in the end zone.
But it got hit through the line, though. That's the fumble, because he was stretching out. I mean, he wasn't protecting the ball, and offenses shouldn't be rewarded for that. So that's my soapbox.
You're right. There's the one on the ends. Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the one. There was just talking one kind of over the middle, which was.
Oh well, I just mean in general. I know every time
I tend to agree.
Pops up,
like
people are like, "Oh, it's the worst rule in sports," and I'm like, "Huh?"
It's definitely the trapezoid or the shootout, as Ian would say.
Yes,
the NHL is the one that needs to change the rules.
Right? Yeah, the NHL has the worst rules in sport. Trust me. The fumble out the back of the end zone safety. That is so far from the worst. But anyways, sorry. Go ahead, Braden. Break the tie. I got the 49ers. He's got the Chiefs.
Yeah, I guess for preseason stuff, I think I did have the Niners beating the Bengals, but I think with the Chiefs involved, you know where I'm going on this, and I kind of mentioned it to Kyle. I think with the defense, this is probably the least nervous that I've probably been for any of the recent Super Bowls with the Chiefs. I know McCaffrey is probably going to be the toughest thing to stop, and they have a lot of weapons, but I think just the way Steve Spagnuolo's got been able to get pressure on guys and take away some of the best weapons, or at least neutralize them. I just feel so comfortable, I think, with that defense. And I think you look at the Chiefs, they've been able to kind of play different styles of games right now, whether it's kind of a ground and pound gritty approach, or if they do have to kind of air it out. I think that Buffalo game was probably the best offensive game they've had in the playoffs for sure. But I think with San Francisco, I just don't know if they can play as many different styles of games right now. I think Purdy's a really good quarterback, and I think Shanahan has some trust in him. I just don't know if he wants to get in a consistent drop back pass game with him like we saw on Christmas against Baltimore. So I just think better defense. I think just how much the players have been vocal about going back to back after not doing it a few years ago too. I think that's just something that's got him so locked in right now. So I got Chiefs 30-20 in this one. I'm kind of in between a high scoring game and a low scoring one. I think there's going to be a lot of success with the run game, and I could see some turnovers also leading to maybe some quick scores. So maybe in between a high scoring and low scoring game, but I'll go 30-20 with the Chiefs.
I'd say a high scoring game certainly would favor the Chiefs, because I think that is a little bit different from what we've seen all season. And if it's a high scoring game, then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, this offense is clicking. So yeah, I think that if you're the 49ers, you need to keep this game in the 20s. If you're going shootout for shootout, then I don't know if you're going to win this game. So all right, that's going to do it. Super Bowl 58. There we go, locking it in. Got 2 for the Chiefs, 1 for the 49ers. Hopefully I'm right, and all will be well in the world. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we appreciate you joining us every Sunday morning as we talk and preview all these football games, and we look forward to continuing to do that in the future. But for today, for tomorrow, happy Super Bowl Sunday, and we'll be talking to you soon. So enjoy your day, be safe, and have a great Sunday.